Hey guys, welcome back again to the Casual NBA Fanatic podcast. Today's segment is just going to be racking off some quick takes related to our predictions for the upcoming NBA season, and today's topic is my projected top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference. Just the 3 teams that I believe will walk away from the regular season as probable contenders, especially in this weak Eastern Conference that we do have now. Obviously, we have the Bucks, who do look quite underwhelming overall. You also got the Pacers now, who's probably anticipated to have a massive drop-off this next season. You have the questionable 76ers. You have the Boston Celtics, who just lost a ton of firepower entering this next 82. And so it does leave us with this only just really a fine pool of teams worthy of a top 3 slot in this poor conference now. Just leaving the gate open for so many of these mediocre squads to actually make a run at a high seed, a high playoff berth. And so getting into it, at number 1, I think it's going to be quite obvious who I do have here, but we do have the Cleveland Cavaliers building upon their regular season success of last season. Last year, 64 wins and an extremely dominant offense that posted a league best 121 offensive rating and a third best 9.2 net rating, backed behind their 2 All-NBA players and also their All-Star offensive engine in Darius Garland. Now, with Cleveland, my belief starts directly with the personnel that they have. I genuinely think Donovan Mitchell has the chance to be a top-tier pioneer for a contending squad. His rim pressure just isn't just valuable against certain matchups. Genuinely, this guy is one of the most matchup-resilient small guards the league has ever seen, and he has proved that ever since he stepped foot in the NBA. Now he is in the heat of his prime, entering another season, probably fueled with motivation with how the Cavs flamed out last year in the second round. And just the rim pressure piece for Donovan Mitchell, that's the absurd part. You talk about the footwork, you talk about the body contortion, the elevation speed, the verticality. They're all so immensely elite, and they do allow him to get to the cup with extreme ease. Last year as well, on pretty low usage compared to previous years, Mitchell gave you an extremely strong 24-5-5, claiming his first All-NBA first-team selection as well. And with Mitchell, it was just the critical moments where he particularly stood out. In clutch time as well, just that shot palette becomes that much more valuable. And he is one of the most dominant 3-level scorers in basketball. And just with that real pull-up weapon that he has and an ability to flourish drawing contact at the rim, that does make him an extremely tough task to actually match up against. And last year in that playoff run, I know we're not really grading playoffs versus, we're really just analyzing how we think these teams will perform in the regular season. But last year, in that playoff run, Mitchell gave you 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists on 52% effective field goal percentage. And he was really just that reason for their competitive fight amidst all the injuries that were plaguing the surrounding stars on that Cavs roster. And with Mitchell, just year by year, he just keeps giving this extreme playoff value as the lead monster. And that does start the belief and why he is knocking on that door of that top 10 player in the NBA. And though I don't really think he holds the crown just yet as a top 10 guy in the league, I just think he has the chance to assert himself as the king of the Eastern Conference this year with Cleveland, especially with Jason Tatum out. Giannis probably won't be quarterbacking one of the better teams in the NBA, and with his main rival being Jalen Brunson, I think he really has a chance to take that title. And then moving on from Donovan Mitchell, you have DPOY and elite value big man Evan Mobley, just coming off a confident surging career year as well, where he just averaged 19 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2.5 stocks per game on 60% effective field goal percentage. And it really just was the extreme versatile defensive value that made Mobley just this absolute package of literal impact on the floor. We're talking about high quality rim deterrence, but we're also talking about the switchable frame that could swarm, cover, and limit perimeter guys with absolute ease, just limiting the advantages that you could create on the perimeter. And with Mobley as your regular season defensive captain, I think it's pretty clear of the Cavs' high defensive floor for the 82-game stretch. And having the lineup versatility as well, when you also sit him next to a high-quality big man like Jared Allen, just sitting him next to Evan as well, where they can actually fully destruct any sort of rim pressure value that stars try to bring with their help side rim protection pairing, and just the stout physical tools that both a Jared Allen and Evan Mobley frontline pairing can give you. And then also when you're backing up just such a fortified frontline defensively, obviously the point of attack line just doesn't really stand out too much, but it is extremely serviceable when we are analysing in a regular season scenario. And in terms of just the personnel that they have, they can perform to an at least achievable rate as well. You have guys, relatively decent athletes at that, with guys like Donovan Mitchell. You have DeAndre Hunter. You have Lonzo Ball. You have Max Strus. Guys that do compete with veteran intensity when the stakes do rise as well. And the only issue with their current roster construction in relation to becoming that super high tier defense is just the constant rotation that they do typically find themselves in. Last year, obviously they had weak athletes in Darius Garland, Ty Jerome, and Sam Merrill, and these are guys that routinely get exposed so heavily, and that does leave the Cavs in constant help. Just makes them give up so many easy kick-out lanes and open spot-up possessions. Last year, the Cavs gave up the 8th most points per possession per spot-up possession last year. Just a pretty average mark overall, and it does help when you do have a space-covering monster roaming free like Mobley, but this help can only mend so much. And without Mobley as well, I mean, these possessions are inevitable, and what did bite them in their matchups against teams like Boston and Indiana last year. And then also adding another knock onto the defense, we've even seen possessions where both Mobley and Jarrett Allen can severely struggle to physically harass perimeter scorers, especially when we are talking about switching context here. Especially particularly wings and oversized guards that do pose as real diversified scorers. Mobley himself, someone who can struggle battling with upper body strength, where credible separation and downhill penetration can be attained if you do have the shoulder size to shed him downhill. And with Jarrett Allen's case, talk about the lateral movement. Sometimes he doesn't really attempt to force penetration on drives. He rather just prompts pull-up looks, and that does give players the comfortability in the airspace that they want to get comfy pull-up looks on the perimeter. And that's where they can actually struggle sometimes with the switchability. But overall, in a regular season context, it's not too big of an issue at the moment. That's just more of a playoff hole that needs to be filled. But in terms of the execution, just the Cavs with their actual personnel have put together a very strong team defense. They are carved around an emphatic defensive guy, someone who does wreak so much immense schematic versatility, and someone that can give you real help side possessions at an elite level. And then offensively as well, just a well-oiled machine who take care of business against all teams that they have true favorable advantages against. Obviously, they have avenues for simple advantage creation as well. They have two guards who are elite rim pressuring players in the NBA who can offer the rim pressure in different manners as well. You talk about the power, you talk about the speed, the agility, and the nimbleness that mark the driving partnership between Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Guys that present different advantages against different matchups. And in terms of the spacing as well, they can have these minutes with Mobley at the 5 where the Cavs can fully space teams out as well. And with role player talent, that also does satisfy the star foundation. You have veteran guys like Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, Sam Merrill, Lonzo Ball, Dean Wade, Larry Nance Jr., all guys who provide physical intensity for the most part and do pose as high cognitive IQ guys who can also uphold this system polish that the Cavs were able to do last season. Obviously for Cleveland, they have 3 All-NBA caliber regular season guys, and 2 of them in particular have shown an ability to actually completely level up their games come postseason time in Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell. And for the pristine polish and the motivation factor for Cleveland, just this upcoming regular season should be relatively smooth. Maybe not as dominant as last season's, with more of an emphasis to preserve their stars, more so before the playoffs do hit, and that was probably what did tank Darius Garland and Evan Mobley a little bit come postseason time. But definitely with Boston out, I think Cleveland to me just look like the best regular season juggernaut team out in the Eastern Conference this year, and I do have them finishing first. Now moving on to our projected second seed in the East this year, we do have the New York Knicks, a team that I anticipate to build upon their success of last year with a coaching change and minor personnel changes to review, as they do remain mostly unshaken overall. Now, something I want to quickly reiterate here, in the NBA, there has been one thing that's been made clear, and that is really just team culture, which just matters so much in the modern NBA. And that was showcased most by OKC and Indiana last year. Obviously, having the talent and the system and the habits are important, but just having the culture and the united belief, that does give you guys the motivation and perspective to go in and play undoubted basketball. And there are just so many factors that go into it. I mean, you got front office attitudes that can affect different morale, you got coaching staff, you have player staff relationships, you have chemistry, you have veteran to youth energy. But for New York, just the coaching shift, that identifies a substantial cultural shift overall. And that is no knock on Tom Thibodeau, it just more has an emphasis on voice variance in the locker room. Like, you are bringing in another hard-nosed voice, someone who will no doubt hold guys accountable for their mishaps, their failures, and the lapses in attentiveness to the team game plan, and that will automatically shift a team's overall attitude towards winning. And for an issue that did stem from the defensive inabilities of their two main stars, I just think New York has the opportunity to come in with a fresh voice and establish a new identity that does feature less vulnerability to giving up offensive surges and continuous openings with an emphatic head coach's voice in that locker room. But last year's results for New York, and that is a big reason why we do have him still here as a top 2 seed, and they were really convincing the last year's results. I mean, obviously they get the conference finals appearance, but they also get the 3rd seed, just establishing the 5th best offense in basketball as well behind their balanced style of offense, with Jalen Brunson at the helm controlling and initiating the bulk of their possessions. Now, obviously, a big reason why I reckon New York will build back on their success is because of just their strong offensive structure. They have legitimately 4 guys in their starting unit who can float various regular season stretches of possessions. And despite not having much in the way of movement and off-ball value integrated in their current system, just the Knicks still pose guys who can still provide versatile creation stretches. Obviously, you can rely on the heavy load lifting from Jalen Brunson as one of the greatest high-volume creators in basketball, but you also can rely on OG Anunoby providing some powerful stretches of bully ball and creating strong separation on the perimeter with his push-ups. And then also Karl-Anthony Towns too, just offensive juggernaut of power, skill, and mobility. Someone who gave you credible possessions out of post-ups and isolations considering his position. And then you also have Mikal Bridges as well, who was actually extremely efficient out of pick and rolls. Last year, getting you 1.0 points per possession on about 2 a game. And so just in terms of the actual talent piece of it, New York are extremely strong, just role players as well, who can actually give you a strong range of diverse possessions in that starting unit. But offense really just hasn't been the issue for this team. Just the Knicks, as currently constructed, are decently matchup proof offensively, and that is backed behind also this physical identity that they do bring in their shot creation tendencies. But defensively, and also just finding balanced two-way guys to fuel impact from the bench are the major issues that have plagued New York's ability to contend against the most resilient rosters in the NBA. I mean, defensively, let's start. It's really just starts with the anchor. Karl-Anthony Towns, he may be one of the worst defensive players in the world, considering his role and the time that he sees on the floor. And just such a detrimental, non-existent help-side defender as well, who just doesn't really give much in the way of rotations, and that is typically relied upon by your defensive anchor. Now, Cat isn't really a bad athlete as such, but he does lack the vertical pop and the direction variance, and he can't exactly dodge bodies and get quick lift for contests, but he also doesn't really try either, and it's really just this two-factor cause, and just the disengagement that just allows for so many holes and easy avenues for dribble penetration, which has really worked against New York, establishing a credible defense, especially when both Brunson and Cat are on the floor. And it's just so hard in today's NBA to build around 2 liabilities in your starting unit. 2 guys who are both at the most compromising positions on the floor. And to be honest, either way, this will bite New York. But when we are just scoping here into just regular season success, I do think the personnel factors and the ability to play satisfactory team defense with their clutch time strengths do give them generous wriggle room, as they do project to get another 50-plus wins relatively easily. For me, I just think from the physical and skill advantages across the board offensively, I generally believe in Jalen Brunson as a top 10 player in basketball. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's averaged about 28 points, 3 rebounds, and 7 assists over the past 2 seasons on 55% effective field goal percentage at your point guard spot. A guy that has claimed 2 All-NBA placings. I mean, I just think he's that good right now. And overall, he's one of the most sustainable engines in the NBA overall. And I have no doubt in his ability to, again, command a top-tier regular season squad in the Week East. And that is the biggest reason why I do have New York as a top 3 seed once again. Now, my last choice, my predicted third seed in the East next season, is a team which does have major flaws and still doesn't really have a top-tier superstar talent just yet, but just a team that does flex elite physical tools that do give them a tremendous defensive baseline, and that does relate to the Orlando Magic. Now, a big boost, obviously, for Orlando, and why I reckon they do make a decent leap, is just the natural progression piece. Obviously, Paolo and Franz, now with a bit more consistency, now coming off their previous multi-month recoveries during last season, they should be able to continue building and refining their extremely raw perimeter shot touch, and that will play a big piece in leveling up the offensive game for Orlando. But by far the biggest piece for me, and the obvious standout change, is the insertion of Desmond Bane, who no doubt will make Orlando just that much more dangerous of a competitor, now shadowing many of their flaws in terms of just the off-ball gravity and the intention drawing issues that did deprive Paolo and Franz of easy downhill opportunities throughout the entire season. For me, Orlando did give us a ton to already be happy about in the past 2 seasons especially. Franz Wagner last year, absolutely exceptional, just tremendous downhill penetrator, who just has so many great downhill techniques with that 6'10 frame. And last year, he puts together a 24.6 rebound and 5 assists season on 51% effective field goal percentage in that extremely terrible offensive situation, just leading a strong Orlando stretch of basketball as well in Paolo's absence. We saw him captain a 13-3 stretch before his oblique injury towards the end of last year. And obviously Paolo as well, he just gave us another showing of just the floor-raising skill set that he brings at this point in his career. Paolo now, through just 2 playoff series in his career, he's averaged 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. And I know only 50% effective field goal percentage, but for a 22-year-old, it is relatively incredible. But it's not just the star core. I mean, it's just the actual physical foundation that seems so strong. I mean, you have back-to-back years as a top 3 defense, just the league leader in opponents' points per game as well last year, and one of the premier teams that do focus on the margins. And despite horrid skill concerns across the roster with raw youth still developing, I do think Orlando have been commendable at making the best out of a pretty shocking offensive situation. And then when you are adding in Desmond Bane, I mean, you're talking about a guy that just alleviates a ton of these concerns. Last year, Orlando was the 3rd worst team in spot-up efficiency. They were the 3rd worst team in transition efficiency, the 2nd worst in handoff execution, 2nd worst in pull-up shooting, and dead last in converting on off-screen action, and also dead last in catch-and-shoot efficiency. And to fix that plethora of concerns, I mean, what better can you do from an individual move than to bring in a guy who last year shot 38% on pull-up threes on high volume, a guy that shot 42% on threes off the catch, and a 93rd percentile off-screen scorer, and someone who could be utilized for Orlando this coming season as a flaring screener, giving Paolo and Franz the requisite advantages that they need to get clean and favorable matchups time and time again. And to be honest, a huge reason for me having such strong belief in Orlando's regular season success next year is just their strong identity and the favorable advantages against literally every matchup in the league. I mean, we're talking about a team that is absolutely huge, and you know, in terms of rebounding and rim protection in general, that has been a strong suit, giving them more wriggle room in tough games, and just adding in a high gravitational movement shooter like Desmond Bane, that just eases the offensive process so majorly. And obviously the star fit isn't seamless, but certainly has proven to be a valuable investment so far, and these guys are still so young. And that does also mean that they will no doubt attack this regular season as well with that youth, just making a clear statement for what is to come. And for that, I do have Orlando in my 3rd seed, and I reckon they will have a substantial improvement building upon what they have already achieved in the last 2 seasons. Now, the teams that I've left off this list that will certainly rival these picks, and that does make up a pretty long list, and the amount of mediocre basketball rosters in the East is pretty absurd this upcoming season. I mean, you got teams like Atlanta, you have Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Detroit, Indiana, Miami, and Boston. Teams that could rack up respectable games as well, just by their veteran star leaders that still present as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if teams like Washington, Toronto as well throw themselves towards some more playing level of wins this upcoming season. But out of this group, the only teams that I really see competing for a top 3 seed is Atlanta. And to be honest, just the chemistry, the availability concerns, and the unorthodox style of offense, leaning towards extreme doses of pick and roll and extreme heliocentrism, that does give me too many question marks for me to place them above a team that has established a true basketball identity like Orlando has in the past few seasons. But between the three on this list, I think it's pretty clear Cleveland does stand as the best amongst these top three seeds. They have the greatest list of depth and star power foundation, just beautifully spread across the roster as well in a way that doesn't jeopardize any sort of defensive structure like you would say for New York. Obviously, Orlando doesn't really have the same skill level at all compared to New York and Cleveland. Just their physical identity, though, brings them fairly close, in my opinion, for the 82-game stretch. But overall, it'll be interesting to see just how the East shapes out. I mean, there is a world where Philadelphia can run a top three seed if the health and availability really shift their direction. And who knows what will happen with Indiana's pristine system. That may still lodge them into a top tier offense. But for me, in terms of just the variables, these do just pose unlikely at this point. And in terms of just the likelihood, I just see these three franchises cementing the top of what is an extremely weak conference this season. So with that, I mean, those are my three teams in order to finish the 2026 NBA regular season in the East. Cleveland at 1, New York at 2, and Orlando placing 3rd. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Let me know what you guys think and who should have cracked here instead. Hit up the IG at Casual NBA Fanatic, and I'll be coming back soon with more ranking and predictions for the upcoming season very soon.